A spaceship is an expensive toy. You realize this very clearly when you look at its smoking wreckage. Actually, I was fortunate in the sense that I was alive. If I hadn't lingered on the bridge over the dried-up river that separated the wasteland where I landed from the abandoned village, I would have exploded with the ship. I thought I saw something at the bottom, but on the closer look, I realized it was a bizarre play of light and shadows among the pellets, and what I was looking for on this planet was not there. It was a really small chance of that, anyway. For once, my life had been saved by my own stupidity, not an achievement to be proud of. Usually, it works the other way around. The area was deserted, so I didn't bother to build a full defensive perimeter around the ship. Still, I wanted to know who had managed to plant a charge under the ship in the 45 minutes I'd been searching the ruins. I was sure it wasn't a missile, an orbital cannon, or something like that. Those are hard to miss. To be sure, I walked around the crater. Nothing. If there were any traces here, the explosion had scattered them with the dust. Well, if I can't find anything here, I'll have to figure out what to do next. First, I took a quick look at the remaining gear. Weapon, a modernized military-style pulse gun in a hip holster. The charges are less powerful, but the energy cells hold 3 times as many rounds. I won't have to fight off Ullerian cyber tanks or penetrate the armored bunkers. At least I hoped so. 6 spare energy cells in a cartridge box on my belt means I'm good on spare ammo. Clothing and footwear. Well, at least I didn't go outside in my pajamas. All comfortable, reliable, pre-selected for the planet I'd have to work on. Got lucky with the location this time. Sure, it's too dusty and arid, but it's still not a jungle or an icy fridge. I hate cold planets, and my last job on the Flower Joy only confirmed this deep-seated feeling. The rest, a flask of water, and most importantly, a compact active filter. I could scoop water from any puddle as long as it didn't glow with radioactivity. I looked around at the barren landscape of a few stunted bushes and rocky hills, and my enthusiasm for water waned. It seems to be a sparse resource here. What else? An army knife in a sheath on my belt, and a mini comb on a special mount on my left wrist. The comb was mostly useless now. Its main purpose was communication and remote control of the ship and the skimmer, but there were a few things left. First, a small scanner. The range was paltry, but it was better than nothing. Second, a geopositioning system. Blessed be the idiot philanthropist who had placed a bunch of satellites in orbit over this dusty hole that could be used to determine location. And that was basically it. I looked at the ruins the customer had sent me as the supposed destination coordinates. It was quite obvious that it had been in all-over state for many years. However, there was nothing unusual about that. If all my goals could be found so easily, professionals like me would have been out of a job long ago. At least on this one, I wasn't limited by time. No deadlines, no questionable competitors, no expiring inheritance cases or criminal lawsuits. Although the burnout scrap metal that had once been my ship now seemed to indicate otherwise. I played around with the comm settings a bit, trying to contact any of the locals. I wasn't planning to talk to them so early, but my choices were cut down by the explosion. Anyway, it didn't work out. The com picked about 5 stations, but none of them answered. Apparently, the locals were no more hospitable than the landscapes they inhabited. Or maybe they just didn't have time to take messages from ignorant outsiders who managed to blow up their ship in the middle of nowhere. So much for the planning. I shrugged and switched the mode, bringing up the map I've downloaded from the Sector Information Center. Unless there were radical changes in the 8 years since the last update, the nearest village was about 30 kilometers away. It was certainly a distance to worry about, but I couldn't just sit there by a combo of old and fresh debris, waiting for the sun to smile. That's not what I'm being paid for. An hour and a half of monotonous walking across the yellowish-brown plain put me in some sort of trance. Before I set off, I entered the direction to the settlement into my com, so that it would warn me if I lost my way. But the most I had to do was occasionally skirt thorn bushes or small rocky cliffs and walk across the dusty ground to my destination, scaring away the occasional small fauna. Long story short, when one of the cliffs suddenly sighed heavily and stomped in my direction, I didn't even immediately react. I guess it were the wild stock, it could have ended badly. I grabbed my precious pulse pistol when the beast was 2 steps away. Would I have been able to get a shot off, or would it have trampled me? That's a question best not asked. "You ain't from around here," said the man sitting on the beast's back. The beast's large armored head, the size of a skimmer, stared at me with the dual eyes, as if pondering whether or not I was eatable. I hoped I was different enough from local bushes to stay off the menu. I carefully holstered the pistol and spread my hands. "Guilty as charged. Is it that noticeable?" The man shifted his wide-brimmed hat slightly to the back of his head and pulled down the rag that covered most of his face. The face, in expression and texture, resembled the horn plates that protected the flanks and thighs of a beast. "Here," he looked around the unimpressive landscape, "everything is noticeable." His gaze stopped at point behind me. I didn't turn around. I never knew something in a spaceship could burn for such a long time. But only an outsider would walk around the wasteland with an uncovered head and open face. I shrugged silently. I had nothing to say. He didn't expect an answer either. Speaking of the faces, the beast started to turn its head toward the completely inedible-looking blackthorn bushes, and he stopped it with a tug of the tow cord-like reins. "There is some wicked shit going on with your face." I touched the scars on the left side of my face. A stupid habit I should have gotten rid of a long time ago. "Let's just say some really wicked shit happened with my life. Is that a problem?" "Not unless you make it one," he said. "Where are you heading to? South?" I nodded. "Creep house." Another nod. "I can give you a ride." He made some elusive movement with the reins, and the beast sank to its knees with a heavy sigh. The ground beneath its feet shuddered as if the assault ramp of a large landing ship had fallen nearby. "Heading there myself." I put my foot on the beast's huge ugly knee and grasped the horny ridges on its flanks with both hands. Riding the Glamba, as the driver called the beast, was like riding a large boulder. It was about 6 meters high and seemed to be made of bulges and horn plates. However, Jomis, as the rider introduced himself, was comfortably perched on the beast's back. The chair-saddle combo was attached to the carapace with the help of ordinary construction dowels, from which I concluded that either the beast had a very thick hide, or it was completely insensitive to pain. Or maybe it was both. I had no chair, but the beast was loaded with a pile of bales, secured the same way. I climbed there and made a nest from them. Jomis looked over his shoulder at my manipulations and snorted. I didn't know if it was a nod of approval, a chuckle, or he just coughed a fly out of his nostril. After about 10 minutes I asked, "Is Jomis a first or last name?" I realized that beast swaying and stomping were hypnotizing to the point of dragging me into the coma. "Is it important?" came from under the hat. I thought. "Probably not. So think whatever you want." Stomp, 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 stomp. "And what's your name?" Jomis asked. Oh shit, I forgot to introduce myself. "Vyacheslav Shamshurin," I said, "or simply Val." "It's your call, Val." God knows how long this conversation, monotonous as the heat death of the universe, could go on. We exchanged a few more such meager remarks, with pauses of a few minutes, and Jomis even lent me his old hat and a piece of cloth to cover my face from the dust. I was doubly grateful for the latter. First of all, I already appreciated the taste of the local dust. And secondly, being able to cover my face without arousing suspicion was a sure thing coming in handy. I hate it when people look at my face. Though if everyone here had been as emotional as Jomis, it might not have mattered so much. Soon, however, our leisurely conversation was interrupted in the most radical way. They jumped out of the narrow passage in the rocky ridge along which our beast had been stomping for the last 20 minutes. 7 of them, all on high-speed single-seat skimmers, wearing pilot-like jumpsuits and helmets with mirrored visors on their heads. Jomis muttered something inaudible, probably swore, judging by his tone, and poked the beast in the back of the head with a sharp stick, causing it to speed up. It couldn't run away from the skimmers, of course, but I realized the point of the acceleration when the attackers started firing. It's harder to aim even at the mountain if it's galloping. Instead of energy weapons, they had some kind of ancient firearms. You know, bullets, cartridges, and whatnot. I could have marveled at such antiques, but it wasn't in my plans to get a solid chunk of metal in my back, so I spread out as best I could among the bales and horny bulges on the Glumba's back and drew my pulse pistol from its holster. Jomis wasted no time either. He secured the reins and pulled a huge gun out from under the saddle. I was surprised to recognize the Ullerian assault rifle. No bullets, wads, or other archaeology. Good old reliable plasma balls. For the next 2 minutes, some part of me continuously squirmed with laughter somewhere in the back of my mind. The situation wasn't just simply ridiculous. It was absolutely absurd. I was lying on the back of the prehistoric monster, galloping across the desert, trying not to get hit by the bullets of the attackers circling around me, and beside me, with his legs slightly bent at the knees, was Jomis, dressed as a man from a history book, standing up to his full height and blasting at full power from the most effective infantry weapon in the history of warfare. However, Jomis clearly did not practice firing his howitzer often. The plasma blasts blew up fountains of dry earth and crumbled rocks into the rubble, but none of the shots even came close to the skimmers. The skirmish ended in a way I never saw coming. Apparently, the beast had had enough of all the commotion and the bullets drumming on its hide. I heard muffled thumps a couple of times. Or maybe one of the bullets hit a vulnerable spot between the horn plates. Whatever the case, the Glamba suddenly reared up. I never thought that a creature that looked like a mix between tank and stegosaurus was capable of doing such thing. The trick took me by surprise, and I somersaulted off its back into the spiky dust. Amazingly, Jomis didn't fall. By some miracle he stayed on his feet and didn't even drop his rifle. Evidently, he was well familiar with his ride's athletic ability. While I was trying to wipe my dusty eyes and find my weapon, Jomis got the beast back into the proper position on 4 legs, and they galloped away. The 7 attackers did not pursue him. I would have liked to add to my surprise, but what was there to be surprised about? Everything here had been going south from the start. "Don't move," one of the attackers said. "I got your gun." I finally got most of the dust from under my eyelids and looked at them. Indeed, 1 extra muzzle was added to the 7 pieces initially pointed at me. My own gun. "It won't work," I said. "It's got a recognition system set up on me." "Yeah?" said the one holding my pistol. "To hell with it then." Without lowering his weapon, he shoved the pulse gun into the skimmer's luggage compartment. "We'll make do with what we have. The order is the same. Don't move." I wasn't going to, but something in his voice struck me as odd. Unexpected, if you like. At that moment, my companion changed the polarization of his visor. It went from opaque mirrored to just darkened, exposing his face. "We know why you came here," the girl said. "I can say we wanted to help you, but we couldn't let Jomis win you over to his side. What's your name?" I looked at her face, a pretty one, and quite unfriendly. No matter which place I went on business lately, everyone knew everything about me there. "Call me Val," I said. "Not moving, as ordered. Now what?" The settlement looked like a mixture of guerrilla fortress and a junkyard. Everything in it, including the walls and observation towers, was built of old machinery, from small cargo skimmers to large panels that I recognized with amazement as the shielding of the Ullerian assault boats. "You were sent by the Trigon Tech Corporation, right?" The girl whose name was Kelda asked. At least, that's what she called herself when we arrived at the settlement. I can say I was anticipating a pleasant ride in a skimmer in the company of a beautiful warrior. Dreams always seem to fail me. I was brought in on an anti-grav trailer as a trivial cargo. I didn't try to jump out on the way there. It was all too fast, and it was all too unreasonable. I shrugged. There was no point in holding on to that info. They seemed to know enough, whoever they were. It's a routine job. I do quite a few of those. The corporation is outside Federation jurisdiction, so it can't operate directly on the Federation territory. Skelda frowned. We were expecting something like this, but it seemed Jomis had been waiting too. It seemed like a good moment to catch some initiative. What did he have to do with this? What would the local farmers want with Trigon and me? How does he even know I exist? Wait, you don't know anything at all? Skelda looked at me incredulously. You said yourself you were here on assignment from Trigon Tech. Well, yeah, I nodded. But the assignment was outlined in the most general terms. Sort of ordinary task to find lost property. I didn't realize you had a whole lot of drama going on here. What's your beef with this Jomis guy? And why did you suddenly decide to take me away from him? I kinda liked the fellow. Skelda was silent for a while, playing with a metal mug on the table in front of her. I don't understand, she said finally. We discovered the explosion and thought Jomis had captured you. Well, in a way he did. I took a sip from the mug. Interesting. Skelda didn't react when I removed the rag from my face. But she was too young to remember the war, and the planet was far from the war zone. A natural lack of curiosity? I decided to store that fact until better times. He saw me hiking through the desert and offered me a ride to Creep House. Shouldn't I have accepted? Wait, where to? Skelda asked in surprise. To a village called Creep House, I repeated. What? It's some sort of local taboo place? Skelda shook her head. I can't figure you out, she said. For a professional, you're too naive or too stupid. She looked around the neighborhood. This is Creep House, and Jomis was taking you into his lair, which you'll probably never get out of. Interesting. I wasn't expecting that. Wait, but I put the root in the comb. I had a bearing on the Creep House, and Jomis drove his monster right on that bearing. I tapped the device on my wrist. Have you ever heard of jammers? Jomis intercepted your signal and then fed you a phony signal from his scrambler. Do you think he just happened to get in your way? And who do you think blew up your ship in the first place? I squinted. Why should I believe you? It might as well have been you. Skelda jumped up and stared at me furiously. How dare you? It was time to cut the silly talk. What do you know about Progenius, Skelda? And what does Jomis know? And why did I cause the war between you? It's a long story. I put my feet on the table. Are we in a hurry? But I could use a short synopsis. You can skip the Grandma's bio. Skelda stared at me for a moment, biting her lip. The thoughtful version of her was just as awesome. Progenius is gone, she said at last. Blame Jomis for that. I opened my mouth to ask a few important questions, but at that moment a siren wailed and the first explosions went off. A few seconds later, one of the Skelda's deputies, or associates, I didn't bother to check the local chain of command, burst into the cabin. I noted that he was just as young as Skelda. Jomis cyborgs, he exhaled. How many? From which direction? The boy looked at Skelda. Man, was he scared. Looks like all of them, he replied. And they are everywhere, coming from all sides. To confirm his words, something fast and black darted into the camp over the outer wall, and met by a gun volley from the defenders, crumbled to dust near the hut. This one, in addition to horny growths, had long, leathery wings. I decided now would be a good time to enter in this fascinating dialogue. It looks like you could use my professional help, I said, standing up. Can I have my weapon and its charges back, please? The fierce gunfire started at all the walls, towers, and everywhere, but even that could not drown out the roars and screams outside. The most dangerous was not the Glumbas trying to ram the gates, or even the flying creatures like the one shot down in the center of the camp. The creatures that gave us the most trouble were about a meter tall. They accelerated on their short but surprisingly fast legs, and then they would suddenly curl up at the last moment into a tight, armored ball that would roll straight into the wall and explode on impact. I immediately realized how my ship had been blown up. A small local animal would have been ignored by a low-level security system. I would have ignored it myself. We killed almost all of them, but 3 live bombs managed to make it to the wall. And that's when the humans came in. Or rather, creatures that were once human. I have seen a lot of Ullerian Special Forces combat action during the war. These cyborgs could at least give the Ullerian commander a headache, even though they looked like the spawn of the stone-mad scientist from a cheap horror movie. I wondered, why bother with Cyber Beast if those droids are so effective? And why are cyborgs so ugly? Was it done to make a stronger impression? Or is it simply impossible to cram all these devices into a human body without making it look like the hellspawn? Well, if anything, I was impressed. When it was almost over, there were only 3 Creep House defenders left. Skelda, me, and another girl with a large deep scratch above her left eye. The others lay motionless where Jommy's cyborg shots had caught up with them. The 3 remaining cyborgs were keeping their aim on the cabin, where we were hiding in the far corner of the camp. We were keeping our aim on the space separating them from us. Neither of them saw us, nor did we see them. Almost a standoff. Only they had a way to retreat, and we didn't. "Hey, Val!" The loud voice came from afar. "Listen, Merc, we need to talk." Jommy's figure was barely visible through the smoke and dust in one of the breaches, but the wide-brimmed hat was hard to mistake for anything else. I took aim, but lowered my weapon. It was too far away and too dusty. A pistol is not a sniper rifle. "What do you want?" I shouted. "Come out, let's talk calmly. There is no need to keep yelling." I checked the charge indicator of my pistol. 11. Almost nothing. Almost, but not quite. "So your crazy droids can shoot me?" I shouted. Skelda and her friend, whose name I didn't know, looked at me like I was a precursor artifact. "He'll kill you," Skelda said, "and then he'll get us." "If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it already," Jomis shouted. "Look, I have nothing against you. We can make a deal." "He'll kill you," Skelda repeated. "We'll see about that," I replied, and walked out. Surprisingly, Jomis kept his word. The cyborgs didn't shoot, though I'm not sure if it would make a difference if he hadn't kept his promise. It was only the last one, the third, that I had trouble with. I took out the first one with 2 shots, and the second one, who was hiding behind an old barrel, with a 6-shot burst. Rusty steel is not the best defense against pulse weapons, even with the light load. Apparently, too little brain space was left in his head after installing the tactical processor. The third managed to fire a few shots at the spot where I had just been, and that was it. 2 charges went straight through his implant-mutilated head. Apparently he had some kind of extra balance processor because he didn't fall, but froze in place like an ugly, ridiculous monument with the hole in the head big enough to see the great attractor through it. I guess They were no match for Ullerian special forces after all. And I had trained with those special forces and completed the course. The only human that was ever able to do that. Now we can talk, I said. So, what's on your mind? To my surprise, Jomis stepped toward me pretty confidently. A few more steps, and I swore silently. The bluish glow of the protective field shimmered around his figure. We can still make a deal, he said. He was holding his Ullerian assault rifle, which was pointed precisely at my chest. One doesn't require much marksmanship skills at a distance of 15 paces. You're just a mercenary, Jomis repeated. You work for money. Give me the girls, and we'll split the profits. I know you're here on behalf of Trigon Tech. When I get what I need from the girls, we can give Trigon back what they want. You can even put this mission on your resume as a success. Girls are hiding something that doesn't belong to them. It doesn't belong to you either, Jomis, I said. You were fired from Trigon, what, 20 years ago? He was clearly shocked. How did you? It doesn't matter, though. I've got the half of it. The girls have the rest. If we get Progenius back to Trigon, that will solve everything. Think about it, mercenary. That's at least 500,000 credits apiece. I grinned. 500,000? A tidy sum. But you see, I've already been paid by Trigon Tech. And the thing is that when I'm paid, I always see the job through. He almost made it. Almost. I think if he didn't rely on the protective field, he might even had a chance to pull the trigger first. But I didn't aim at him. The Ullerian assault rifle is one massive piece of technology. A standard Federation space trooper's force field extends about 15 centimeters from the body. A 1.5 meter rifle would not fit within that radius if held horizontally and aimed at an enemy's abdomen. A lot will stick out, just enough so that the edge of the big energy cell protruded beyond the field, which is where I shot. Good thing he didn't come any closer, but I still got splashed. That was a shame. I was getting used to the fashion around here. It had a kind of rugged style to it. But you can't go around messed up like that. Splatter it all over from head to toe. So what now? I turned around. Skelda and her friend were standing behind me. They had guns in their hands, but they weren't pointing them at me. I threw my cape, hat, and face cloth down to the ground. Nothing, I said. I'll go back to Trigon Tech and let them know the mission is accomplished. The old theft has been solved and the case is closed. Hopefully, the bonus fee will be enough for the down payment on a new ship. What about Progenius? You weren't hired by the Trigonians to get cheap revenge on Jomis, were you? I looked at the wreckage of humanoid cyborgs and the mangled biomechanical carcasses of the monsters. What about it? Progenius is gone, isn't it? It's at least half destroyed. The half that Jomis had. And you're not going to... You won't ask us what happened with the other half? Skelda asked tensely. I slipped the empty pulse pistol into its holster. What for? I already know. The girls looked at each other. Very fast. Way faster than two normal people could have done. You know what? Skilda asked. Her hand with the gun twitched slightly. I shook my head with a sigh. If I go looking for someone or something, I find them. That's what I get paid for. I pointed to the girl with the abrasion. I guessed it almost immediately when I saw your village. No vegetable garden, no well, no warehouses, and the tonic you gave me was poured from 25-year-old can, though you had carefully dusted it off. But the final proof was this. I pointed my finger. A human with a scratch like that would have blood all over the face. Jomis had a partner, Skilda said slowly. His name was Skilled. I managed to reply with a single movement of my eyebrow. I'm still proud of it. He was against Jomis' plans to open an underground factory to produce Progenius-based combat cyborgs. Initially, Jomis must have fed him some crap about fighting the evil corporation, I nodded. And then, when everything was revealed, he killed him. Skilda shook her head. No, he didn't. Worse. She pointed to the cyborg I'd shot, still standing like a scarecrow in the middle of chaos. He turned him into this. But before that, Skeld managed to split Progenius into two halves. Hyperneural superprocessors can be split this way and even multiplied, though rarely. Jomis was left with the military part, technologically advanced but lacking in personality. And Skeld was left with me. Artificial intelligence above the third level is forbidden in the Federation, I said. The same goes for the conglomerate, but you wouldn't want to move there anyway. So, if I were you, I'd move somewhere where there's no control and no one pays attention to anyone, like the worlds of Kshadra. But we don't have the money or documents. We don't have a ship. We won't be able to... I sighed. I hope you had a functioning skimmer stashed somewhere. I'd hate to walk 120 kilometers to the nearest spaceport. You have chosen a secluded sport for good reasons, but seclusion has its drawbacks. Skilda and her friend, sister, clone. Shit. I suspect in 30 years we'll have to introduce the new kinship terms for their species. Anyway, they stared at me like the common inexperienced girls, which in fact they were. In a few weeks, I'll get my full payment from Trigon Tech. I'll add some cash from my savings, buy a ship, and come back for you, I said. But why? I looked at the dirty red rocks beyond the wall, from where the wind blew dust all over the destroyed camp. Certainly not for sightseeing. I was paid to fight Progenius and make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands. I'd done the first part. I nodded toward the unkept spot where what was left of Jomis lay. Except Trigon's own hands don't look right to me either. But they paid. I grinned. And when I'm paid, I always see the job through.